Content must follow context. We as teachers are not only tasked with the responsibility of teaching the content of music, but in most cases we also provide and model the context. Sadly, the vast majority of music education has smothered the student with content and then asked the student himself to make sense of what he has learned, provide a context for the information if he can, and determine whether or not he finds value in it as he goes, with very few guidelines. Imagine being asked to put together a 1,000-piece puzzle without being able to see the picture on the box, or being given any idea what it is even supposed to look like in the end. Now, content is certainly important. After all, the majority of what we will do as teachers is to organize and structure content and to disseminate it as appropriate. Fingerings for the A-flat major scale, the proper angle of the elbow while drawing the bow, the spelling for a D augmented 7 chord. These things matter a lot. Having said that, to give those pieces of information to students who lack a context for them is akin to being strict on the technique a budding gardener uses with his or her hoe, without ever first allowing him or her to be drawn in by the beauty of a blooming hydrangea, or to bite into a first ripe red strawberry after a hot day of weeding the patch. What does all this mean? Most parents want to equip their children to enjoy and participate in music. They see the value in it, and in many cases, they never had the opportunity to learn themselves. They act upon this impulse by putting the child in lessons, perhaps consulting the student on which instrument he or she would like to play, or perhaps not. More often than not, the student does not have a childhood full of family singing and dancing to sow the seeds of a lifelong love of music. They are perhaps often unable to model a relationship with music and the related social and creative experiences that go along with such a relationship. They entrust the entire creative education to the teacher or the school district, not knowing that to provide a meaningful context for the love of music is not simply an aim or part of the framework of most of these educational systems. So how can we do differently? Well, first, whether or not students have an in-home model for music making and creativity, we as teachers need to assume that we are their first and most significant models. We are the ones who model what a life in music looks like. We are the ones to whom the student will look as he or she determines whether or not the hard work that goes into practicing is worth the fruit that comes from it. We are the ones who teach them how to practice, how to listen, why to listen, and what to listen for. And not only this, we are often able, through just a little bit of extra work on our part, to provide the context for social music making for them. We needn't subject students to years of individualized education in a one-on-one setting, followed by hours alone in a practice room, toward the end goal of standing alone on the edge of a stage, for a recital. Some particularly introverted students might be able to tolerate this experience, but even those students would still benefit way more from accountability, the levity and humor of friendship, the camaraderie of trying and failing with others, and realizing that it is okay to do so. Most students, however, quickly realize that the whole ordeal feels isolating, unnecessarily competitive and comparative, lonely, lifeless, and perhaps altogether miserable. By simply providing opportunities such as jams and social music making events in an informal setting, students are able to grow together, learn together, and befriend one another. They share stories and laughter in between songs. They feel human. Music can take root in their lives and in their relationships. They don't have to be good, they can simply play. Following this contextualization, all of the content has a home. Once a student hears the beauty of a Bach partita for solo violin, she may begin to ask how she might create such a beautiful sound, and may even wonder about how she might improve that bow hold herself. At this point, the information that you have to offer as a teacher is received as a gift, not a chore. When a young student first begins to compose his own music, he will explore the sounds he hears and will not only be ready to learn the spellings of various chords, he's likely to ask before you even bring it up. When a young guitarist experiences and falls in love with the joy and freedom of improvising and spontaneously making music with others, he will be frustrated by his inability to execute the technically challenging melodies he imagines, and will be excited to learn the more efficient left-hand fingerings you have to offer, which will free up his creativity still further. I have seen students study diligently and obediently for 5 or 6 years without a context, and despite well-meaning home practice routines and disciplined lesson review, they flounder and they're not yet ready at the competency required for the level 2 classes that we teach here, or even close. I've seen students who have a context for making music at home, siblings to play with, a supportive and spacious context for creativity, free time. Those students have progressed naturally into very advanced content in the matter of 6 months. It isn't about just having a good teacher or even practicing more, as much as it is simply about working appropriately on the skills required to do a job with a view of that job itself in mind. Like working on a puzzle intelligently, knowing what it should look like and organizing the pieces by color and shape, having seen the picture on the front of the box. So how do we practically put context first? Well, we need to create an environment where students can learn implicitly in the same way that we learn language. We create an environment that allows them to learn things without our needing to even articulate what they're learning, perhaps without their awareness that they are even learning them. In a musical setting, this can be customized in countless ways, depending on the instrument, the style, the natural limitations of the community in which you live. We've built our entire program here at Michigan Academy of Folk Music around the model of social learning, community education, and context-first teaching. Regular jamming and social music education are a good starting point, but the basic first principle is that at least as much effort should be put into creating a good context for musical development and flourishing as should be put into the specific musical content that the student is currently wrestling with. Put the context first, and the student will almost certainly develop a more meaningful, intuitive, relational, and generally positive relationship with music. More than that, put the context first, and the student will probably gain a more thorough mastery of the content in the long run as well. Thank you.